Good morning, Sunnyvale. Let's see if things are working. Hope everyone's doing well, staying cool. Now their voice heard from. Get started in just a second. Good morning. Good morning, Sunnyvale. Happy Friday. Hope everyone is staying cool, and that's going to be an issue this weekend, but I'm sure if you have a plan, definitely you can find a way to stay cool in our city. Welcome to my weekly virtual office hours. This week's early artwork is another one of our utility box art program pieces of art, and happy to see that artwork around the city. This is a raccoon on the side of a utility box I think it's at Iris and Fair Oaks. So definitely we're seeing most of the artists have now completed their art. So you have 16 new pieces of artwork spread around the city from north in Moffett Park at Crossman and Caribbean to south on Long Homestead in Belleville. So lots of new art to see, but really thought the cute raccoon was a nice addition to our Sunnyvale art. Seeing that going around the city, and it's just fantastic from that standpoint. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly session. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thanks for joining me again this week. This is the 167th installment of my weekly office hours. Hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy, staying cool. We have now reached 1,215 days since the March 16th, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. Over 3 years ago, I converted my weekly coffee shop office hours into these live stream addresses, and people still say they appreciate hearing from their mayor each week, and it allows me to give you some updates of what's happened at the city level, give you some view of what's upcoming, and just answer some of your questions. And for me, people still say they enjoy seeing their mayor each week, so I continue to do it. And thanks for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale. Most Fridays like today, I also follow up this live stream session with an in-person meeting at Being Seen on Murphy Avenue. So if you would like to reserve a 15-minute or 30-minute time slot, you can email me at council@larryklein.com, and you can also send your questions there if you have questions about what's happening in the city. And then you can always see my calendar at larryklein.com. So I basically show the upcoming events that we have, as well as when I'll be having office hours. And so I can't make it every week, but I try to make it as often as possible. And with that, let's go ahead and talk about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last few weeks. 2 Saturdays ago, we were at the grand opening of Cup and Cone, and it was a lot of family, friends, residents that came out. So Cup and Cone is on Mary Avenue, right next to Zanotto's, and that Zanotto's shopping center. And it was a great turnout, and especially with the hot weather coming up for summertime, perfect time to be opening up a new ice cream store. So definitely, if you're looking to cool down this weekend, go out and visit them. Definitely, they're open. Then they're also, it's another place to get breakfast and coffee. So they're open early in the mornings. So it gives you another coffee location within the city, and family run, as opposed to the Starbucks and the Pete's and the Phil's. Always good to support small family businesses. And then, of course, last Tuesday was Independence Day. Hope everyone had a great day celebrating our nation's freedom. I spent the morning at the San Jose Rose, White, and Blue Parade. And I was there. It's always amusing wherever I go around the county. I'm always meet up with Sunnyvale residents. So lots of Sunnyvale residents there to enjoy the parade. And there were lots of elected. So, I walked with our new assembly member, Evan Lowe, and the large crowd that he's had for years there. State Senator Aisha Wahab was there, Supervisor Lee was there, and lots of the electeds from around the county. But it's always good to join that fun. And then, of course, I spent the rest of the day at several block parties and picnics around the city. Definitely, there's a lot of people out celebrating. It was because it was on a Tuesday. A lot of people didn't. I don't think as many people took the week off or didn't have a long weekend, but lots of parties around the city that day. And I think it's summertime, and so lots of different neighborhoods having block parties and getting together and enjoying the summer. And then last week also, PG&E finally removed the power from City Hall and the City Hall Annex. And with that, we finally are allowed to be starting the demolishing. So the old City Hall, the Rabbit Hutches, the Sunnyvale Business Center that was next to the library, that's already been fully demolished. And then the City Hall, the old City Hall, they've already torn down probably about half of it. So happy to see that that's actually been moving relatively quickly. We'll see if how much can be done prior to the state of the city as far as tearing down all that, tearing down all the old buildings, filling in the basements, and then landscaping, putting in the amphitheater. We'll keep our fingers crossed about how much can be reopened. But looking forward to that finally moving forward after, staff moved in March, and now it's been, 3 months of waiting for PG&E to finally be able to disconnect power. So our construction teams can actually do that deconstruction. So anyway, happy to see that's finally moving forward, for all the kids that always enjoy watching, especially the backhoe tearing down buildings. There's lots of great things to witness as they're tearing down the old City Hall and piling up the debris. So I've been watching that pretty much on and off every day this week when I've been visiting our City Hall. And then last Saturday at the library, there was a bike safety and repair workshop. So volunteers from Bike Sunnyvale were there to basically share safety tips and kind of talk about a quick check, but there are also professional bike mechanic to help you, repair your old bike and kind of give you some tips on what you might need to do. And then as far as this week is concerned, Tuesday council met and we went way past midnight. It was a big item that went on for about 4 hours, but we finally approved after, multiple years of doing community outreach, the Moffett Park Specific Plan. And we've been discussing that for a long time. taking and this was, I think, one of our most robust outreaches that we've seen, and taking the questions that people had, answering them. For me, it was a big change. It's like it's looking at 10 million square feet of additional office space, but 20,000 units, a 500,000 square foot of retail. And then it's also looking at, all the things that go along that. We're trying to do real urban planning, making it into a walkable, bikeable community. It's designing a small city in the north part of our city, but lots of advocates talking about the different issues, and hearing from developers, hearing from the Sierra Club on what we can do from an environmental standpoint. There are bats in one of my issues that I brought up was making sure that the bat population is there with all and can survive, and what can we do to make those levees walkable. And one of the good things that we're looking at adding is a multi-use pedestrian bike path throughout Moffett. So a full east-west greenway, and then there's also a diagonal. So basically kind of two main paths, one to go completely east-west and then one to go diagonal from kind of the northeast corner all the way to the southwest corner. So trying to make sure that as we're adding housing, as we're looking at adding retail, and that's one of the things I've been working on in the background for a while now, is trying to make sure that we actually have a major grocery store in Moffett Park. I think that will be good for the new residents that are in Moffett Park, for all the business people that are there, but most importantly, for all the people that live in North Sunnyvale. So not having a major grocery outlet is at the corner of Tasman and Fair Oaks, but it's about a 1,200 square foot 12,000 square foot store. And most of the large grocery stores are, at least 30,000 square feet. So making sure that there's a viable large grocery in North Sunnyvale, and lots of issues that we discussed, but I was really happy with all the different outreach and how we had done outreach over the last few years of focusing on land use, transportation, environmental issues, and focusing and doing a deep dive on those issues, getting community feedback. And I think the final plan is, fantastic. I was on the planning commission in 2004, almost 20 years ago, when we approved that first Moffett Park specific plan. And it was a 20-year vision. And, but at that point, it was only seen as mainly an office park with a little bit of retail. And 20 years later, it's like it's re-envisioning it to add housing, to add retail, to make sure that it's there. But looking at that full range of I've been there at the beginning, and now I'm seeing kind of the next vision of that same plan. So happy to finally get that across the line. We already have multiple developers they're talking about building housing and retail, multi-use locations, and figuring out overall what can be built there, what fits in with that new plan. And I think we'll see lots of construction in that area over the next few years. And then Wednesday night was for some people the official kickoff for summer, but it was the kickoff for a Wednesday night summer music series here in downtown. So the Megatones were here. They've been here in past years, but it was great to see so many people there. It's Wednesday night music every night or every week until the end of August. So the last one I think is August 24th. But lots of people out, and it was just a great event. Lots of people dancing, and I think it always takes a few weeks for it to even hit critical mass. So a lot of people were there, but it'll be word of mouth. It'll be people planning to bring their friends, next week and the week after. But happy to kick that off and see, people coming to downtown, enjoying the beautiful, beautiful weather. And, it was a perfect evening, nice, it cooled off from the midday warmth, and and people enjoying the restaurants and the bars and, you know, just the fantastic environment that we have downtown. And of course, our new pedestrian mall. So happy to see that, you know, earlier this year, we finally went through the process of closing Murphy Avenue permanently, making it only a pedestrian zone. And I think that, you know, that only makes that environment better because, you know, people can plan to feel safer about having their kids there and not worrying about the cars that are cutting through Murphy Avenue. So happy to see everyone there. And, you know, I'll be visiting when I can over the next 2 months. And, you know, hopefully you get a chance to enjoy it. And then last night was our first meeting of our new Human Relations Commission. And it's been a few years since, you know, we've been talking about creating, and we first created a new position within the city, an equity, access, and inclusion manager. And then the second phase of that was actually creating this new commission, which, you know, we went through an interview process. We picked our first 5 people and had our first meeting last night. And, you know, it was great. You know, it's been years since the city's created a new commission. And so it's great to have a new group of people that are doing community outreach. And one of the biggest thing is that this commission will be doing is highlighting those voices for those people that are often not really heard in the whole process. And what was unique about this is we have at least one commissioner that is Spanish monolingual. And so making sure that, you know, we have on, you know, translation both ways. So the power of technology, having translation services going on simultaneously. So automatic translation of English to Spanish and Spanish to English, so that, you know, so that they can be an active part of the conversation. And then people that are there that are Spanish speakers can follow along completely. And we've done, you know, translation services for those meetings where we know that we have Spanish speakers coming to give testimony, hear what's going on. But this, you know, trying to improve our city processes so that, you know, this becomes a standard, so that we can, you know, support multiple languages all the time. So happy, you know, happy to be part of that first meeting and kind of, you know, usher and help the new commissioners understand what their roles are and how the commission works. And, you know, happy to be part of that process. So, you know, good to see, you know, fantastic new commissioners that are going to be part of serving our city. And then today, of course, is a spare the air alert has been raised for the Bay Area. You know, rising temperatures are expected to hit triple digits by later this weekend. And so, you know, this is for people should be, for one thing, no fireplaces, although I don't think that's a big issue, but reducing what people are doing, mowing their lawn, on that. And then, of course, reducing their energy usage, especially in the afternoon. So kind of going through our standard process of, you know, opening up your windows overnight in the morning to cool off your house, closing them up in the morning. For those of you that have air conditioning, you know, try to cool off your house earlier in the day, and then hopefully not have to run the air conditioner during the hottest parts of the day. So all those sorts of things, you know, there could ultimately be issues with the grid. So whatever you can do to reduce your electric usage, electricity usage, you know, please do that, you know. And then, of course, just stay hydrated. Make sure that you're drinking enough water, making sure that, you know, you're trying to stay cool wherever you can, you and your pets and your kids. And then, of course, if you need a cooling center, you know, the libraries will be open for the next few days, and like every day, and the hottest parts of the day, from that time between, you know, 2 and 5 p.m., which is usually the hottest parts of the day when things heat up. So hopefully everyone is staying cool. And then as I said previously, you know, I won't be covering COVID numbers, you know, unless things change, and maybe that won't be happening until the fall. But, you know, for me, you know, I continue to work on our city's behalf, advocating at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level. You know, I met with Congressman Khanna 2 weekends ago, and it looks like we were able to get $1 million in federal funding for fire station number 2. So that was one of the things that we had been advocating on for a while now. So we're doing a long-term renovation of all of our fire stations, and that's the first one that will be renovated. But happy to continue to advocate at the state level, and trying to get additional funds for our city, trying to make sure that we get our fair share of our tax dollars and that they're coming back to us. Let me go ahead and announce some of the upcoming events. Lots of events are happening in the summer. Tomorrow night, of course, is the beginning of Jazz and Beyond. So much like our Wednesday night rock and roll and pop bands and all that. Saturday nights for the rest of the summer will be Jazz and Beyond. The first, and this is rhythm and blues, jazz, soul on Murphy Avenue until the end of August. Our first performer is Max Cabello Jr., and so it'll be Latin and blues, and it'll be starting at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Come downtown and enjoy the Latin and blues music, as well as the restaurants will be serving at your table. So lots of opportunities to enjoy what's happening on Murphy Avenue, and so lots of good things for the rest of the summer as far as that's concerned. Starting today. For the next 2 weekends, the Sunnyvale Community Players will be performing Willy Wonka Jr. And so this is the summer youth production of the Sunnyvale Community Players. So that's happening, I think, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the next 2 weeks. There will be, I think there's a golden ticket hidden among the Wonka bars being sold at the concessions. And so if you find the golden ticket, it basically gives the winner free tickets to any production next season for the community players. And Mayor Wonka will be making an appearance tomorrow night. I've been talking to the organizers, and they would love to see Mayor Wonka show up. So if you're going tomorrow night, Saturday night, I'll be there, and so will Mayor Wonka. And then on Sunday, so this Sunday from noon until 5 p.m. at the Quarter Note on Lawrence Expressway. So that's the bar restaurant that's right on Lawrence Expressway, just north of Central. They will be having their annual canine search and rescue benefit. So that's happening from noon until 5. And it'll be barbecue and live music and raffles and an auction. But most importantly, you get to meet the search and rescue canines, meet some of their handlers and owners. Always a great event, and always happy to the owner, Robert, for continuing to, support the canines and that whole search and rescue effort. I think he's done it for about 20 years now, and so really happy about that. So come out, enjoy the fun. And then both days this weekend, the Friends of the Sunnyvale Library will be having their book sale. It'll be happening all day Saturday, and then Sunday, of course, will be the $5 book bag sale. So come out, find a summer book, join the summer reading program. But lots of things happening around the city this weekend. And then as far as council meetings, our next council meeting is Tuesday, July 25th, and council will be looking at approving the noise and air quality elements of our general plan. So doing an update to the general plan as far as that's concerned. And that's something that the state requires you to update your different plan elements, depending upon what the element is, every 5-10 years. And so it's the updates for noise and air quality. And then in August, so August 8th will be our following meeting, and it'll be a very busy night. They'll be starting with a study session on the Village Center Master Plan. So talking about the village centers that we have our city in around our city, and how we're looking at updating our master plan to meet some of the state, housing laws. And then we'll consider converting the all-time, actually right now, the part-time bike lanes along Homestead Road into full-time bike lanes. So that, lots of residents have already been talking to me on that. And then we will also have conceivably an update to the downtown specific plan for some additions that City Line wants to do for the Block 18 lot. That's ultimately right. It's the lot just north of Whole Foods and the AMC Theater. They're looking at making some changes before they, move on to that. So right now they're looking at finishing the apartments and, the apartments, the retail, and the office at the old Macy's site around Redwood Square. And they're looking kind of forward on what they're going to do on that last, I'll say, the Macy's parking lot, the open ground level parking will be most likely the last site at that project that will be developed. With that, let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. Gia Wen asked, when will the tot lot at 7 Seas Park be reopened? Ultimately, I talked to city staff. They're sending that out for procurement right now. So going through our procurement process of getting that surface repaired. Definitely, there have been some issues with the surface. I think one of the kids was injured, and ultimately what they decided to do was close the tot lot until they can get all that repaired. And so they're going through that process. And so hopefully sometime soon, but right now the tot lot at 7 Seas is currently closed. Wendy asked, will there be new walkable schools for all the resident kids at Moffett Park? And so it's like, definitely, as we're adding 20,000 units of housing, there will be kids as well as adults there. It's not just a working livable space for adults, but yes, it's like, that's one of the things that we've been in discussions with the schools on. And there's already developers that are considering that they would be willing to donate land towards a future school. So those discussions are already going on. Ultimately, Sunnyvale School District is saying that conceivably they would need an elementary, middle school possibly in that area. Fremont, talking to Fremont Union High School District, there's already been lots of residents in the north part of Sunnyvale saying that they should have that there's a need for a high school in the north half of Sunnyvale. And so whether or not this is part of that plan, that becomes one of the bigger issues. But yes, there have been lots of discussions of having a walkable school in that neighborhood or in Moffett Park. Lori asked, great to see the old City Hall being demolished. When are we going to start tearing down the old fire stations in Sunnyvale? You realize the fire stations are the same as when I was born in '64. Let's get the firemen some updated stations. So yeah, so we actually we've been working on a fire station master plan and trying to look at the renovation schedule for all of our older fire stations. But we already have a plan in direction from council to start the design for fire station number 2 rebuild. And so that's the fire station right across from Lowe's at Fair Oaks and actually at Wolf Road and Kiefer or Arquez, at Wolf Road and Arquez. And so we've already got that. Just happy to hear that through advocating, looks like we got at least $1 million towards that from the federal budget to help with those renovations. But that's one of the things that council has already given direction to get moving on, redoing that fire station. Alan asked, if my family does a summer barbecue at Las Palmas Park on Saturday, is it first come, first served for the picnic site? So most of our different parks have a mixture of picnic sites that are reserved and then some that are on a first come, first served basis. So, you can go onto the city website, search for parks, and then it will list each of the parks and how you go through the reservation process to reserve specific picnic tables, or you just show up very early and, set out your stuff and stay there while you're waiting for the picnic to start. So it depends on which park that is, but a lot of our parks have both. And so if you want to make sure that you have a space permanently and just show up and have it assigned to you and pay the fee as far as that's concerned, that's available, or just show up and take your chance. Joe asked, is the small little night market area where Central Computers used to be still around? I feel it had potential but never got traction. I would love to see a food truck night market in the area again, like Sports Basement used to have years ago. So yes, the pod, I forget what they called it, but yeah, the food truck pod that's right next to, I'll say, Bevmo Plaza, right where the old Central Computers used to be, right there on El Camino, close to the border between Mountain View and Sunnyvale. That is still there. I actually ate there earlier this week. Had grabbed tacos at Gato's Tacos while I was going between meetings and stopped off. But yeah, there's one or two food trucks there, I think almost on a nightly basis. I definitely had wished that it actually got more traction, but there's seating there, and hopefully as we get into the summertime, maybe we'll get a little more momentum to bring that back. But yes, it's still there and still active. Eric asked, good afternoon, Mayor Klein. Last year you guided us by bike from Sunnyvale downtown to Day on the Bay. Will you be doing it again this year? So yes, Saturday, October 14th is Day on the Bay. I did confirm that with Supervisor Lee's office, and they are planning to have a bike ride event from downtown Sunnyvale to El Viso. We'll see if San Jose Bike Party is part of that and all that, but I've added it to my calendar, so I should be able to be there that morning and lead off the crowd from Sunnyvale into El Viso. But a lot of fun last year. Get there and lots of booze and booths and food and music and all that. So a fun day on the bay. People could go kayaking and lots of great events. Kim asked, as I continue to live with my liquid amber tree, which has wrecked my front yard, sewer, and is a public hazard to pedestrians, bicyclists, I signed up for the liquid amber removal list several years ago, and hopeful that the city will consider funding a program to directly assist Sunnyvale residents with removal of this horrible tree. So I checked with the city manager, and with the money that council allocated to basically catch up on some of the tree trimming that we delayed during COVID, that the liquid amber replacement program will be restarted. And so with the money that we set aside for tree maintenance, that will also be restarted, so that people can get their liquid amber tree replaced, so taken down and replaced with a more, let's say, a less invasive species that doesn't have roots that rip up the sidewalks and go into the sewers. I have that same problem on our street. We have lots of liquid ambers, and we've had issues with the sidewalk. We have patches, and this is the ongoing thing of having trees, and trees are really fantastic, but some trees cause more problems than others. Liquid ambers being especially an issue with not only the roots, but the spiny pod seeds that drop, that people step on, or people can conceivably twist their ankle or something of that nature. So so happy to see that we're finally restarting that program. Yar asked, When will the Las Palmas Park water features, Lake Kids Fountain, be operational this summer? They are beautiful. So several people had asked this over the last, over the last few months. We restarted the splash pads back in April. We refilled the Braley Park little water feature and the Sarah Park water features about 3 weeks ago. And, after fixing some patching issues in Las Palmas Park for their pond, we finally refilled that pond earlier this week. Of course, as soon as we refilled the pond, I was contacted by, others who found, that decision was irresponsible and a waste of water. We are no longer in drought conditions, and lots of people enjoy that, those water features, and I think it makes the parks generally cooler, especially during the summer. And so, sitting next to the water can be very cooling in the shade. But that was refilled after the patching issues. Las Palmas Park was refilled, I think just earlier this week or over last weekend. So I just ran by it this morning, and definitely it does have water again. So happy to see, that park is active, and, I think water features are nice to have. Ultimately, yeah, there is evaporation, there is that, and the city did the right thing when we're in drought conditions. You don't fill them, you let them go dry. But we are no longer in a drought condition, and we'll make a decision in the future as as we renovate all of our parks. If people don't want those water features when we're being renovated, we'll take them away. But all I've heard, I've heard from multiple residents, thank you for refilling those water features and having, adding beauty to those parks that wasn't there for multiple years now. Johan asked, wondering if you have any insight on what's going on at the old Wendy's building on Matilda. So yeah, so the Wendy's on Matilda, at Matilda and Maud, it's planning to be a Taco Bell, and the renovations are currently underway, and actually it looks like they're making good progress as far as that's concerned. Joan asked, what is the timeline for the walking paths and the outdoor amphitheater to complete it at the Civic Center? Will it be in 2023? Yes, it'll be in 2023. Last I heard, though, because of all PG&E delays, it might not be until sometime in October. We're looking to see what we can do as far as, improving that time frame, and then conceivably at least prioritizing one section or the other as we're looking at, state of the city in September. So seeing what we can get to by September is really important. Let's see if anybody had any questions. Looking at the scale model of the underway Civic Center development on display at the City Hall, it looks like the parking area next to the library won't be as large as the current space. Is that correct? So the model, so if you want to take a look at what was envisioned at the library, ultimately we did a Civic Center model, and that was just kind of what was envisioned when we finished the first kind of outreach. And so that first out, and that kind of laid a long-term vision for the city. That being said, we've only decided to do phase one. So phase one was the new City Hall, and ultimately ended up being an addition onto public safety. The long-term vision that you see in the model that's on the second floor of the City Hall, it actually has a brand new library across from the new City Hall, and it has a new public safety building next to the library along Charles. That was kind of the first vision. One of the things, so two things. One, adding the addition onto the public safety building, so adding that new 2-story building right at Pastoria and Olive. doesn't basically, and then doing renovations inside the current public safety building reduces the need to quickly build a new public safety building for quite a few years. So that at least pushes that requirement off for about 10 or 15 years. And then as far as the library, it was kind of a placeholder for phase 2. And so later this year, staff will be coming back to council on, and then we'll be doing more public outreach on whether or not it's a wholly new 2-story library, or whether or not it's the renovations on the existing library and an addition. But all that parking would be figured out as we look at what phase 2 is, and phase 2 would be a library, and whatever that it ends up being with the library, and where that parking goes, that was just a placeholder. We've talked about when we went through that initial civic center modernization outreach, we thought about that there might be a 2-story parking garage in order to maintain the amount of open space. Things will not be changing anytime soon. We'll figure all that out when we make that decision of what the phase 2 library is going to be looking like. And the biggest thing is, where all the what is construction zone now, where the Sunnyvale Business Center used to be, that a lot of that will be first the buildings will become, where the buildings used to be will become open space. So to be, nicely landscaped and seating and all this other stuff. And then there'll be parking behind it. So, none of that's going to be changing anytime soon. That parking will come back. So there'll be parking for people that are coming to the library, coming to the Civic Center in that general area, going to Charles Street Gardens. So yeah, parking and all that has not been worked out in any way. And so, ultimately, the biggest question is what the next vision of the library is going to be and how we're going to pay for it, whether or not it's a bond, what people want to do and what people want to see from a library standpoint. That looks like all of my questions. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. It's been a busy week, several late night meetings, but that's part of the job as being mayor. Thanks for joining me again, for this session. We live in interesting times and new issues come up, almost every day. But I want you to know that no matter what challenges we face them together. I'm proud of Sunnyvale and how our residents have responded to all the different challenges over the last few years. I'm thankful for a great community, everyone who helps out and shows their generosity, their kindness, their friendliness and welcoming to anyone and everyone. Your actions and your attitude really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful weekend. Try to stay cool. Goodbye.